Have you ever had a moment where a single sound, just one, felt like it split your entire life into a before and an after? That's exactly what happened the night my phone rang at 2:47 a.m., dragging me out of sleep with the kind of dread that only late-night calls create. You don't expect joy at that hour, only disasters. And when I saw the caller ID flashing my grandson Ethan's name, my heart immediately understood what my mind refused to accept. Why would a 16-year-old boy call his grandmother instead of his own father in the middle of the night? That very question is why the YouTube title, My Grandson Called Me from the Police Station, His Stepmom Hit Him and My Son Didn't Believe It, exists, because this wasn't a misunderstanding, and it wasn't teenage rebellion. This was a cry for survival, and the thumbnail text, Grandson Begged for Help, isn't exaggeration. It's exactly what he did. When I answered, Ethan's voice didn't even sound human. It sounded like pain trying to speak through a broken throat. "Grandma, I'm at the police station," he whispered, and those words sliced through me like glass because I knew Ethan. He wasn't the kind of boy who cried or dramatized. Something catastrophic had happened. "Chelsea hit me, but she told them I attacked her," he choked, and that sentence froze me. His stepmother hit him. His stepmother hit him, and he was the one behind a police desk. Even worse, he added, Dad believes her. He won't even look at me. The room felt smaller. My lungs tightened. I slid out of bed so quickly I nearly fell, fumbling for clothes with shaking hands. 1,000 thoughts clashed in my mind like crashing steel. Why didn't Rob believe him? How badly was he hurt? Why was Chelsea doing this? But underneath all that noise was something far more dangerous waking up, the investigative instinct I had buried years ago when I retired from law enforcement. People assumed age dulls the edge, but as I stared at my reflection in the dark closet mirror, gray hair wild, face soft with grandmotherly lines, my eyes looked like the eyes of the woman I used to be, Commander Alina Stone. A woman who had interrogated criminals twice her size, tracked down killers in the dead of winter, and survived situations people wouldn't dare imagine. And tonight, she was being summoned again. I told Ethan not to speak to anyone until I arrived, my tone sharp, commanding, the voice he remembered from childhood stories about my years as a commander. He whispered, Grandma, please hurry, and the way he said please will haunt me forever. It wasn't impatience, it was fear, deep, bone-cold fear. The kind you feel only when no adult in your life believes you and the only person who ever protected you is miles away. As the taxi rushed me across the city, the neon lights smeared across the windows like tears against glass. I stared out, shaking, remembering the boy Ethan had always been, gentle, quiet, thoughtful. The boy who still called me after school, the boy who still visited me even when his father stopped, the boy who deserved laughter, not stitches. And then, inevitably, my thoughts slid to Rob, my son who had once adored me, once clung to me, once trusted me with every secret. The same son who now wouldn't even take my calls because Chelsea had slowly, methodically, poisoned him against me. The same son who now believed his wife over his bleeding child. The police station appeared in the taxi headlights, a cold, gray building that felt more like a judgment than a place of justice. When I walked in, the young desk officer glanced up and asked, Can I help you? But the moment I said, I'm here for Ethan Stone, something shifted in his expression. And when I added my full name, Alina Stone, the color drained from his face. He stood up straighter. Commander Stone, he stammered, glancing instinctively at my expired badge, which I had shoved into my pocket without thinking. Even after all these years, my name still carried weight in these halls. Please follow me, he said quickly, voice tight. I didn't know he was your grandson, and that sentence alone told me one thing. Something about this case already stank. The walk to the waiting area felt like a march through memories, every corridor, every buzzing light, every police poster reminding me who I used to be. But none of that prepared me for the moment I saw Ethan sitting alone on a plastic chair. His eyebrow was bandaged, his hands were trembling, his eyes red, swollen, ashamed, lifted when he saw me. Grandma, he whispered, and he ran into my arms the way he used to when he was 7. His whole body shook against me, and when I finally looked up, my gaze crashed directly into the two people who had caused this nightmare. Rob. Arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes refusing to meet mine. And Chelsea sitting casually with a perfectly rehearsed victim expression, fake tear stains on her cheeks, and a fresh bruise that looked as staged as a cheap movie prop. Her expression said, Look what your grandson did, but her eyes said something else entirely. They said, I'm winning. And that was the moment I knew this night was far bigger than a domestic dispute. This wasn't just about a bruise or a lie. Or a misunderstanding. This was the opening scene of a war I hadn't chosen, but one I would absolutely finish. because what I was about to learn next would prove Ethan wasn't just hurt, he had been hunted. Have you ever walked into a room and felt, before anyone even spoke, that the truth had already been bent, twisted, and nailed down by someone who wasn't afraid to lie with a straight face? That's exactly what washed over me when Captain Spencer opened his office door and motioned for me and Ethan to step inside. It wasn't just the fluorescent lights or the stale smell of burnt coffee. It was the air itself, heavy with someone else's version of events, already written, rehearsed, and wrapped neatly around Chelsea's trembling act. The moment Spencer closed the door behind us, I felt Ethan's hand tighten in mine, a silent plea not to let him drown in that room of official voices and cold paperwork. I could see he was bracing himself, not for punishment, but for disbelief. And disbelief, when it comes from your own parent, cuts deeper than any bruise. Spencer, older, balder, more tired than I remembered, settled into his chair with the weight of a man who didn't want to be in the middle of anyone's family disaster. Commander Aliner, the situation is complicated, he began carefully. That phrasing always means one thing: someone already told a good lie. As he read through the report, each word was like a needle pulled from a poison kit. According to Chelsea, Ethan came home late, became aggressive when she confronted him, pushed her down the stairs, and then struck her when she tried to calm him. My grandson, a boy who apologized to chairs when he bumped into them. A boy who wouldn't step on bugs because they didn't mean any harm. They were painting him like some violent delinquent. Spencer added almost apologetically, the bruises on her arm, they support her version. I felt Ethan flinch beside me, not just from injustice, but from the shame of being spoken about like a suspect instead of a child who had begged for help. Spencer went on, the home security cameras had conveniently been broken for days. No neighbors heard anything, and the only adult witness, Rob, corroborated Chelsea's story without hesitation. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Of course, Rob believed her. Chelsea had been softening him, molding him, isolating him for years. I had warned him once gently that some people don't enter your life to love you, they enter to take inventory. But he thought I was jealous, overprotective, unable to let him move on. And now here we were. And Ethan's version, I asked, even though I already knew it would be brushed aside like lint. Spencer sighed. He says Chelsea struck him without provocation using a candlestick, but there's no object matching that description in the home. No object, because the woman who staged a fall down the stairs wouldn't forget to hide the weapon. This wasn't sloppiness, it was strategy. And then Spencer delivered the line that stung more than anything else. Ethan's story lacks support. Lack of support. That's what happens when the truth is held by a boy and the lie is held by a manipulative adult. Ethan lowered his head, swallowing whatever emotions threatened to escape. That small gesture, a child trying not to break, ignited something sharp inside me. A fire, a promise. I placed my hand on his and said softly, "Look at me." He did. His eyes were glossy, terrified that even I might question him. "Tell me exactly what happened," I said. "All of it, no fear, no hesitation." And then the dam cracked. Ethan began to speak, his voice fragile but determined, describing how Chelsea waited for him in the darkened living room like a shadow with teeth. How she called him names she'd never dare say in front of Rob. How she grabbed his arm when he tried to go upstairs. How she struck him with something heavy, yes, a silver candlestick, so hard his vision blurred. And how, as he lay bleeding on the floor, she slammed herself against the wall over and over, creating the bruises she later presented as evidence. Even Spencer paused at that part, because the truth, when it's finally spoken from the mouth of a trembling child, has a different temperature. It warms the room first, then burns it down. "Where was your father?" I asked. "Asleep," Ethan whispered. "She gave him tea earlier, said he needed to relax. He never woke up until everything was already staged." That word, staged, hung in the air like smoke. Suddenly, the picture sharpened. The broken cameras, the missing candlestick, the strategically timed bruise-making, the rehearsed weeping at the station, Rob's dazed loyalty. Chelsea's game wasn't chaos, it was choreography, and Ethan had been her unwilling partner. Spencer rubbed his face. "Aliner, legally, without evidence, there's very little I can do tonight, but I can release him into your custody until the investigation continues." "Do it," I said immediately. His pen hadn't even finished clicking before I added, "And Spencer, this is not a simple assault. Someone in this family is orchestrating something dangerous." He met my eyes, and for a moment I saw the reflection of the commander I used to be, the woman who solved cases by noticing what everyone else overlooked. He nodded once, as if silently agreeing that something here didn't look right, but then the office door opened again. Rob walked in, and if I thought the worst part of the night had passed, I was wrong. Rob didn't look like a father fighting for his son. He looked like a man defending his wife from an inconvenience. "I've signed the release," he muttered. "Can I leave now? No concern, no love." Not even a question about Ethan's injury. He didn't even glance at the bandage stitched across his son's eyebrow. "Rob," I said quietly, "your son needs you to listen." "No," he snapped. "What he needs is to stop lying." Ethan's breath hitched, and in that moment, something inside me cracked, not from anger, but from heartbreak. Because betrayal from an enemy is expected, but betrayal from your own flesh feels like your ribs folding inward. Rob left without another word, letting the door slam behind him like punctuation. Ethan's shoulders sagged. Spencer finished the paperwork, and as I took Ethan's hand to leave that suffocating room, I made a silent vow that shook me to my core. Because if Chelsea was capable of framing a child, I hadn't even scratched the surface of what she was truly capable of. Have you ever sensed that the moment a door closes behind someone, an entirely different world exists, one filled with whispers, cruelty, and truths no one wants to admit out loud? That was the feeling that followed Ethan and me as we stepped out of Spencer's office and into the hallway where the cold police station air mixed with the colder knowledge that something far worse had been happening long before tonight. Ethan clutched his backpack straps with the nervousness of a child who expects punishment simply for breathing too loudly. I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact, the way his shoulders hunched, as if bracing for another blow, not from Chelsea this time, but from memories he had learned to survive in silence. "Ethan," I said gently, "how long has this really been going on?" He froze. His lips parted just slightly, and then closed again as if he was afraid the truth might somehow make everything worse. Children don't hide joy, they hide pain, and the deeper the pain, the tighter they hold it. Finally, in a voice barely audible, he whispered, 6 months. My heart didn't just sink, it plunged. 6 months. 6 months of insults, bruises, manipulations, and a father too blind or too controlled to see what was happening under his own roof. "She started small," he said, eyes fixed on the floor tiles as if the story was etched there instead of inside him. "At first she just insulted me, called me names when Dad wasn't around, said I was ungrateful, annoying, taking up space." Hooks tightened in my chest, not because I didn't expect cruelty from Chelsea, but because Ethan had endured it entirely alone. "Then she started breaking things," he continued. "My video game, my notebooks, the soccer trophy you gave me when I turned 10, she smashed it on purpose, said it was an ugly piece of plastic. Dad believed her when she said it fell off the shelf. I clenched my jaw so hard I felt my teeth ache. Not from anger alone, but from the dawning realization that Chelsea wasn't just abusive, she was systematic, calculated, building a foundation of lies brick by brick, slowly destroying Ethan's credibility at home so that when she eventually struck him, no one would believe him. "When did she start hitting you?" I asked quietly, terrified of the answer. Ethan swallowed. "A few months after Dad married her. At first it was just slaps, then shoves. She once locked me in the basement for the whole afternoon because I said I missed you." That last sentence didn't just cut, it wounded. A sharp, merciless wound in a place no grandmother ever wants to be struck. I had known Chelsea was dangerous, but not monstrous, not capable of turning a boy's love for his grandmother into a punishable offense. I breathed slowly through the rage burning up my throat. "Why didn't you tell me, baby?" The question fell out before I could stop it, heavy with guilt. Ethan shook his head quickly. "Because Dad would have taken her side, he always does. And she told me if I ever made her look bad, she would make him hate me." And there it was, the heart of every manipulation, the fear of losing a parent. A child will let themselves break before risking that kind of emotional abandonment. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said firmly. "Nothing, not one thing that happened to you is your fault." But he wasn't done. His voice trembling, he added, "Tonight felt different. Grandma, she didn't just hit me this time. When I looked at her, I saw something in her eyes, something cold, like she wanted me gone." That word "gone" dripped with an implication that made my skin prickle. This wasn't about discipline, or resentment, or even jealousy. This was about removal, erasure. Chelsea wasn't trying to punish Ethan. She was trying to eliminate obstacles. And Ethan, just like me, was standing in the way of something she wanted desperately. "Your father," I said softly, "is not thinking clearly. He's not seeing the truth, but that has nothing to do with you." Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't even look at me when he signed the release papers. His voice cracked just once, enough to reveal the devastation beneath his calm exterior. "There are wounds you can stitch, and wounds that never stop bleeding no matter how much time tries to heal them. And betrayal by a parent, that's the kind that echoes through every future relationship a child will ever have." "Your dad," I began, but the words tangled in my throat. How do you justify a father abandoning his own son's truth? How do you comfort a child against the knife his own parent is wielding without twisting it deeper? I didn't have the right words, so I gave him the truth. Ethan, your father is lost, not evil, not cruel, just lost in someone else's maze, and I will not let him drown you in it. A small exhale escaped him, the kind that comes from being believed for the first time in far too long. We stepped out into the cold night, and for a moment the world felt silent, still, suspended between what had been exposed and what had yet to be uncovered. Ethan reached for my hand. Not because he needed help walking, but because he needed to anchor himself to something solid, something safe, something that wasn't Chelsea. As we reached my car, he hesitated, then whispered, "Grandma, do you think she'll try again?" I looked at him, this boy who had been battered, ignored, blamed, and yet still found the courage to ask for truth. And I realized the real question he was asking wasn't about Chelsea's next move, it was whether I could keep him safe. "I don't think she'll try again," I said. "I know she will. But this time, she's not ready for me." Because Ethan thought the worst had already happened. But what he told me the next morning revealed Chelsea's plan was far more deadly than a single night of violence. Have you ever felt a truth lurking in the shadows, so unsettling that your mind tries to dismiss it, but your gut refuses to let it go? That feeling clung to me the entire time I drove Ethan back to my home, as if an invisible hand kept tightening around my thoughts, pushing me toward a realization I wasn't ready to face. Ethan sat beside me, silent, pressing a tissue to the edge of his eyebrow where the stitches pulled against his skin. Every few minutes he would blink rapidly, not from the pain, but from the effort of holding everything together. When we stepped inside my apartment, the smell of cinnamon and warm blankets seemed to soften his breathing, but it didn't erase the tremor in his voice when he finally said, "Grandma, can I stay here, not just tonight?" I mean, can I stay? Those simple words carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. I wanted to say yes immediately, to scoop him into my arms and promise he'd never have to see Chelsea again. But the law has no sympathy for grandmothers, not even former commanders, and his father still held legal custody. So instead, I settled for honesty. "You can stay with me for now," I said gently. "But staying forever, that's a battle we'll have to fight carefully." He nodded, but I could tell from the flicker in his eyes that he believed his future depended on escaping that house. And in many ways, he was right. I made us hot chocolate, an old ritual meant to soothe, but while he held the warm mug in his palms, he didn't drink. He stared into the swirling cocoa like it held the answers to his fears. "Grandma," he said quietly, "there's something I didn't tell you, something I heard last week." My entire body sharpened. "Go on, sweetheart." He swallowed hard. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was going to the bathroom, and their bedroom door was open a little. His voice trembled. Chelsea was on the phone with someone. She didn't know I was there. He took a breath, a long, shaky one, and then the words spilled out like stones dropping into a deep well. "She said, don't worry, everything's going according to plan. When the old lady dies, Rob will inherit her house. We'll sell it, get a few million, and move to Miami. The kid," Ethan's voice cracked, "will send him to a boarding school across the country. Let someone else deal with him." My heart didn't stop, it erupted. Every instinct, grandmotherly, maternal, investigative, collided into a single, chilling realization. Chelsea wasn't just cruel, she wasn't just manipulative. She was calculating a future without me, without Ethan, without anyone standing between her and what she wanted. "Did you tell your father?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Yes," Ethan whispered. "He said I was making it up because I didn't like Chelsea." A strangled breath pushed through my teeth. My son, the boy I raised alone, the boy I protected fiercely through every hardship, had become so lost in Chelsea's shadow that he dismissed his child's desperation. "Ethan," I murmured, "you are not lying, and you are not crazy. Your father—" I paused, searching for words gentler than the truth, but sometimes the truth refuses softness. "Your father is blind right now. That's not your fault, but it was Chelsea's intention. And when a manipulator wants someone under their thumb, they isolate them. They poison their thoughts. They dismantle every previous bond, slowly, subtly, devastatingly." Ethan then unlocked his phone and opened a hidden folder one he didn't want anyone to find. Inside were dozens of photos documenting bruises on his arms, legs, back, dated, time-stamped, undeniable. My pulse hammered. "Why didn't you show me these before?" He looked up, eyes shimmering with shame that didn't belong to him. "Because if I did, Dad would blame you. He blames you for everything now." That sentence landed like a punch. Not only because it was true, but because somewhere in the chaos of Rob's marriage to Chelsea, I had become the enemy he needed to detach from. Chelsea had turned mother against son, son against mother, and child against safety. And I had let it happen by waiting too long to interfere. None of this is your fault, I said again, though I wasn't sure if I was telling him or myself. But the moment Ethan went to shower, I pulled out something I hadn't touched since the day I retired, an old, leather-bound investigation notebook. A relic from my days hunting criminals who thought they were too clever to be caught. I flipped through pages of old notes, names, contacts, muscle memory returning with chilling ease. With a steadying breath, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It rang 4 times, then a groggy, irritated voice answered, "Hello, Linda, it's Alina." Silence fell, then a surprised exhale. "Commander Stone, is everything okay?" No. Nothing was okay. I told her everything, from Ethan's bleeding eyebrow to Chelsea's staged bruises, from the broken cameras to the overheard conversation about my death. By the time I finished, her voice had sharpened with the familiar edge of a woman who had seen enough deceit to recognize a con. "Alina, this woman isn't just abusive. She's dangerous, professional dangerous," I already knew. "That's why I called. I need everything on her," I said. "Birth name, past marriages, financials, criminal records, whatever you can dig up." "Give me 48 hours, Linda replied. "If she has skeletons, I'll find the whole graveyard." After I hung up, I stepped to the window. The sunrise was just breaking, a muted orange line against the horizon, light pushing away the night, but the moment felt like the opposite. Like darkness was approaching, like things were about to get worse before they got better. Behind me, Ethan walked out quietly in clean clothes and whispered, "Grandma, what are we going to do now?" I turned toward him, feeling that familiar fire burning again, the fire I hadn't used since the day I hung up my badge. "What we're going to do," I said slowly, "is stop Chelsea before she destroys anyone else, because she made one fatal mistake." "What mistake?" Ethan asked. "She messed with the wrong grandmother." And 2 days later, when Linda came back with the truth about Chelsea's past, I realized we weren't just dealing with a manipulator, we were dealing with a predator who had left a trail of victims behind her. Have you ever watched someone flip through a folder and felt your entire reality tilt before they even spoke? That's exactly what happened 2 days later when Linda arrived at my apartment at 9 a.m. sharp, holding a thick stack of papers hugged to her chest the way a surgeon carries news that could either save or shatter a family. Ethan was in the shower, steam curling under the bathroom door. I poured coffee for the two of us, but Linda didn't reach for her cup. She simply placed the folder on the table with the kind of careful precision that only comes from uncovering something ugly, something that stains your fingers just by touching it. "Alina," she said softly, "you need to sit down." My stomach tightened. The last time someone told me those words, I had been given the news that Rob's first wife, sweet, gentle, loving Anna, passed away unexpectedly. And the dread I felt now was eerily similar. Something inside me already knew that what Linda found wouldn't just confirm my suspicions about Chelsea, it would expose a predator far worse than I'd imagined. I lowered myself into the chair, the wood creaking beneath me, and forced my breathing to steady. "Tell me," I said, and Linda began peeling back the layers of Chelsea's past like a crime scene long forgotten. "First," she said, sliding the top document over to me, "her name isn't Chelsea Brooks, at least not originally." The name on the page hit me like a cold slap, Vanessa Jimenez Ruiz. Not 32 years old like she told Rob she was 34. Two lies right there. But lies don't frighten me, inconsistencies do. Lies are the mask. Inconsistencies reveal the monster wearing it. "She changed her name legally at 24, Linda continued, right before her first marriage. And then she laid down a photograph, a wedding photo. Chelsea, no, Vanessa, standing beside a wealthy older man whose smile looked warm, oblivious, tragically trusting. "Richard Miller," Linda said, "owned a chain of hardware stores in San Diego. He was 60 when he married her." I felt a sinking sensation ripple inside my chest. "How long were they married?" Linda didn't blink. 2 years. "He died of a sudden heart attack at home." My breath hitched. "Cause of death, according to police, natural." Her tone, however, suggested anything but. "The children tried to contest the will, but Chelsea, Vanessa, received everything. A house worth nearly $3 million. Linda flipped to the next page without pausing for air. Another photo, another wedding. "Second marriage," she said, "to Franklin Adams, textile businessman, widower." Age 58, Chelsea stood beside him, radiant and white, but her smile was different this time. Empty, calculated, like she already knew the ending. "He died too," my voice was barely audible. "Yes, a fall down the stairs." House cameras were conveniently broken. That single detail struck like lightning. Broken cameras, just like Rob's house, just like the night she struck Ethan. A pattern was forming, and it wasn't the kind created by coincidence. "What about the children?" I asked. Linda hesitated. One filed a complaint for threats, withdrew it a week later. She refused to speak to me, said she didn't want to invite trouble. Trouble. That word echoed in my mind long after Linda moved on to the next marriage. Third husband, another older man, another widower, another trail of property transfers and legal power shifts. But the worst part wasn't the husband's, it was the man's son. Joseph Vega, Linda said, tapping the page, married her when she was 30, but this marriage ended differently. How? His son Paul, 26, went missing. The room froze around me. Missing, left home one night, never returned, sent his father a single text claiming he needed time away and that he was traveling abroad. No proof, no follow-up messages, nothing. And Joseph fell into depression. Signed financial control over to Chelsea. She placed him in a care facility and sold everything he owned. My grip tightened around the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. Are you telling me, I whispered, that she destroyed 3 families before ours and no one stopped her? Linda exhaled heavily. They couldn't, or they tried and failed, and there's one more detail. She pulled out a document with a name I had heard once, and only once, when Chelsea made a cryptic phone call the night Ethan retrieved his clothes. Gerald Hayes, her accomplice, Linda said. A lawyer appears in every marriage, every property transfer, every legal document. He covers her steps, and after each inheritance, he receives a very generous offshore deposit. The pieces didn't just click, they exploded into a horrifying picture. Chelsea didn't just marry widowers, she hunted them. She didn't just manipulate children, she erased them. And now her next target was my son, my Ethan, and me. I felt my pulse vibrating in my neck, a war drum from a past life I thought I had left behind. Chelsea wasn't just dangerous. She wasn't just violent. She was a predator who had perfected her method over a decade. Eleanor, Linda said gently, there's more. My breath stilled. What more could there be? Linda hesitated before pulling out one final sheet. Rob matches the pattern, she whispered. Young widower, single father, vulnerable, emotional. Financially stable, easily isolated. I swallowed hard. And me? Linda's voice lowered. A property worth millions, you're the final piece, her biggest reward. A cold shiver crawled down my spine. Everything made sense. The sudden affection Chelsea showered on Rob early on, the way she subtly discouraged him from visiting me, the lies she whispered about me being controlling, the slow poisoning of their relationship with Ethan, the bruises, the verbal assaults. The staged injuries, the broken cameras, the call she made the night Ethan returned home. Everything will be ready soon, the old lady won't know what hit her. She hadn't meant metaphorically, she had meant literally. Chelsea didn't want a family, she wanted an estate sale. Before I could speak, the bathroom door creaked open and Ethan stepped out, hair dripping, wearing the oversized shirt I lent him. He froze, seeing the documents. Is that about her? Yes, I said, my voice tight, and you need to see this. We told him everything, every husband, every suspicious death, every missing child, every inheritance, every lie. And with every detail, his face drained further of color. She killed them, he whispered, trembling, or ruined them, and I was next. No, I said, pulling him into my arms, not next. Not ever. My heart squeezed painfully as I realized something far worse, that Chelsea's cruelty toward Ethan wasn't about jealousy or discipline, it was strategy. Eliminate the child, influence the father, isolate the grandmother. Then wait for me to die or help the process along. Eleanor, Linda said quietly, we can stop her, but we need evidence, real evidence, something she can't twist. And right then, as I held Ethan close, feeling his heartbeat thudding fast and fragile against my chest, I made a vow. Not as a grandmother, not as a mother, but as the commander I once was. We're going to bring her down, I said. Every lie, every bruise, every crime. But to destroy a predator like Chelsea, we needed proof she couldn't hide, and the next clue was still inside Rob's house. Have you ever felt truth sitting right in front of you, so close you can almost reach out and grab it? But it's buried just deep enough that the world will call you crazy until you dig it out yourself. That's exactly how I felt the moment Linda closed the folder exposing Chelsea's history. For a long breath, no one in the apartment moved. The air itself felt heavier, thick with dread, as if the walls were absorbing every secret spilled on my dining table. Ethan sat quietly, hugging his knees, his damp hair sticking to his forehead. His eyes darted across the photos, wedding gowns, smiling men, missing sons, each picture a ghost of a life Chelsea had manipulated or destroyed. And yet somehow, impossibly, she had convinced Rob she was the victim. The woman who orchestrated financial theft, emotional torture, and possibly murder had turned herself into a helpless damsel, and my son, a smart man, a loving man, couldn't see past the veil she draped over him. So what do we do? Ethan asked finally, his voice small yet urgent, not fearful this time, but determined. hungry for justice. I realized then that the boy who had walked into my home 2 nights ago wasn't the same boy sitting before me now. His trauma had hardened into resolve. He wasn't just asking for help, he wanted to fight back. But fights like this aren't won by emotion. They're won by evidence, cold, undeniable, immovable evidence. And Chelsea was an expert at erasing it. We need something tangible, I said, tapping the table. Something she can't hide or manipulate, something physical. Linda nodded. Preferably something tied to the assault. Ethan flinched, but he didn't look away. She used a candlestick, he whispered, a silver one from the hallway table. And she hid it, I murmured, piecing together the night's frantic puzzle before Rob came downstairs. The moment Ethan mentioned the candlestick, my investigative instincts surged. For Chelsea, removing evidence wasn't a new skill, it was muscle memory. Broken cameras, missing objects, edited stories, framed narratives, but if the weapon still existed, and if it held Ethan's blood or her fingerprints, it could cut through every lie she planned to spin. That candlestick, I said slowly, is our leverage. Ethan swallowed, his eyes flickering with a mix of fear and courage. It's in my room, or was. She shoved it under my notebooks. I saw her do it, then that's where we start. I leaned back, letting my mind fire through possibilities, strategies, risks. Going to the house yourself would be illegal. Breaking in would compromise everything. And asking Rob to look for it, he'd dismiss me, or worse, he'd warn her. The only person who can legally go into that house and search for it, Linda said, reading my thoughts exactly, is Ethan. My gut twisted. Sending him back into that snake pit felt like throwing a match into a room full of gasoline. Absolutely not, I said. She's unpredictable, dangerous. If she suspects anything, I'll be careful, Ethan interrupted softly. That wasn't a child's voice. That was the voice of someone who had been fighting alone for far too long. Grandma, it's my room, my things. I have every right to go back. Rights don't stop monsters, I said gently. Ethan leaned forward. Then you won't let anything happen to me. You never have. The words hit hard because they were true. Every major moment of his life where someone failed him, I had stepped in. Every school bullying incident. Every time he cried after a fight with Rob. Every time he felt invisible. And tonight I saw clearly I wasn't just his grandmother. I was his shield, the only one he had left. We won't send him in alone, Linda said suddenly, a spark lighting her eyes as an idea formed. We use cameras. My head snapped toward her. Cameras? Yes, small, covert, wearable ones, the kind private investigators use. Button-sized, sewn into clothing, they'll record everything. We'll see what Ethan sees in real time. My brain caught fire with possibilities. With those cameras, if Chelsea attacked him again, we'd have proof. If she threatened him, we'd have proof. If she confessed anything, we'd have proof. And if he found the candlestick, it would be the beginning of the end for her. Alina, Linda said gently, we can protect him from outside. We'll be close enough to step in if needed. But the law is on our side only if the evidence is collected legally. Ethan nodded vigorously. I want to do it not because I'm brave, but because I'm tired. I'm tired of being scared. My heart cracked, but something powerful rose from the fracture. Pride. All right, I said finally, the decision settling like iron in my chest. But we plan this with precision. One wrong move and she'll smell fear. Linda smiled, the kind of smile detectors get when a new lead breaks open. I'll get the cameras by tonight. Ethan exhaled, long and shaking, but there was anticipation there too. Hope. As Linda packed her things to leave, Ethan watched her with wide eyes. Do you think we can actually stop her? He asked. Linda paused at the door. Yes, she said firmly, but predators like Chelsea don't fall easily, they fight. They twist, they try to get ahead of you, so you must always be 3 steps ahead of them. After she left, Ethan sat beside me on the couch. He leaned his head on my shoulder, something he hadn't done since he was a little boy, and whispered, Grandma, what if she wanted me out of the way for good? Those words broke something inside me. Then, I whispered back, she chose the wrong child to target and the wrong grandmother to underestimate. Later that night, after Ethan fell asleep, I walked to the window, looking out at the glowing street below. The city felt alive with secrets, each light a story burning quietly. And somewhere, not far from here, Chelsea was asleep in a house she thought she controlled, a house she believed was already hers. A house she was ready to weaponize against us. She had no idea I was coming for her. But the next morning, when Ethan put on the hidden cameras and stepped toward that house, none of us realized the truth he would uncover inside, truth far more chilling than anything we expected. Have you ever watched someone prepare for something they shouldn't have to face, something unfair, unsafe, and far too heavy for their shoulders, but they steady themselves anyway because the truth means more than fear? That's exactly what it felt like the next afternoon when Ethan stood in my living room, staring at his reflection in the mirror, while Linda and I carefully sewed tiny spy cameras into the buttons of his shirt. The cameras were shockingly small, so small you could mistake them for ordinary black buttons, but the power they held, the power to expose lies, dismantle manipulation, and capture the monster behind her mask, felt enormous. Ethan lifted his chin absently, his eyes scanning his reflection as if trying to recognize the boy looking back. I could see the nerves tightening inside him, but beneath that fear was something far stronger. A determination that would have made any commander proud. "Does it look obvious?" he asked quietly. Linda leaned in, checking the stitching. "No," she said firmly. "Even a trained investigator wouldn't spot them unless they were looking for something." I tested the camera feed on my phone. Clear picture, clear audio. Every breath he took came through crisp and steady, reminding me exactly what was at stake here. Ethan wasn't just walking into a dangerous woman's house. He was walking into the belly of a trap she had been constructing for years. But this time the trap wouldn't close on him, it would close on her. "Remember," I said, placing my hands on his shoulders and looking him directly in the eyes, "you go in, you get your clothes, you observe, and you leave. If she raises her voice, threatens you, or even looks at you wrong, this time the world will hear it. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you walk out. Understood?" Ethan nodded, but he also swallowed hard. The bravest soldiers still fear the battlefield, they just step onto it anyway. Linda jingled her car keys and motioned toward the door. "We need to leave now if we want to be parked before she notices anything." The three of us headed down the stairs and into her silver sedan. I climbed into the back seat with the phone in hand, the camera feed already showing Ethan's chest rising and falling with nervous breaths. He sat beside Linda in the passenger seat, staring out the window at a city completely oblivious to the war being fought in one small family. As we drove, my mind replayed everything Linda revealed in her investigation. How each of Chelsea's marriages followed the same pattern. How each husband conveniently died or disappeared. How each home had broken cameras. How each inheritance had made her wealthier and bolder. She wasn't improvising, she was refining, and Rob, my son, had become her newest project. And Ethan, he was the collateral she needed gone. My jaw tightened. Not today, not ever. The closer we got to Rob's house, the sharper the ache in my chest became. It had once been a home filled with my son's laughter, the sound of Ethan's tiny footsteps on hardwood floors, the echoes of holiday dinners and birthday candles. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. Linda parked half a block away, behind a large SUV that concealed us from view. "You'll be in range the whole time," she assured us, eyes flicking between me and Ethan. "We'll see everything." Ethan took a breath so shaky I felt it through the phone. "I'm ready," he said, though his fingers trembled. "Yes, you are," I whispered, even though he couldn't hear me. "More ready than you know." He stepped out of the car and began walking toward the house. Through the camera, I saw each movement, the crunch of gravel under his shoes, the familiar wooden porch steps, the front door he had once run through joyfully. He rang the doorbell. A few seconds passed, then the door opened, and Chelsea filled the frame. Her face, devoid of makeup, looked younger but sharper, like a blade without its sheath. Her eyes scanned him the way predators assess prey, calculating, irritated, almost disappointed he dared return. "You showed up," she said flatly. "I thought you'd hide at your grandmother's and make her fight your battles." The comment made my blood boil, but Ethan held steady. "Dad said I could get my things." "Fine, make it quick," she snapped. "And don't touch anything that isn't yours." At least 5 different comebacks hung on my tongue, but I swallowed them, not yet. Today wasn't about justice served through words, it was about evidence. Ethan stepped inside, and the moment he crossed the threshold, something dark pulsed through the camera feed, something twisted and wrong that lived in the walls of that house now. His childhood home had been restructured into a theater for Chelsea's manipulations. He moved through the living room, and I saw the things she had done. Furniture rearranged to appear luxurious, decorative bowls that didn't belong to Rob's style, coldness where warmth had once existed. Then Ethan headed up the stairs toward his room. Every noise echoed in my phone, making my pulse spike. I held the device so tightly my fingers hurt. He reached his door, pushed it open, and gasped. I gasped too. Linda muttered a curse. The room was destroyed, not messy, obliterated. Posters ripped, clothes strewn everywhere like garbage, drawers overturned, books shredded, bed stripped to its frame. Not a trace of respect left, not a trace of childhood. It was psychological warfare. "What happened?" Ethan breathed. Chelsea's voice rang from downstairs, dripping with venom. "You happened. You left your usual mess behind." A lie, a performance. An act for whoever she expected to clean up the story later. Ethan knelt beside his desk, picking up notebooks, slipping clothes into his backpack. And then there, beneath a cracked binder, something metallic glinted under the camera's eye. Zoom in, I whispered instinctively. Ethan shifted a book, and the object revealed itself fully, a heavy silver candlestick, dark stains along the rim. My breath froze. Linda grabbed my arm. That's it, she whispered. The weapon, Ethan knew too. He subtly angled his phone from his pocket and took several photos, then placed everything back exactly as he had found it. His hands shook, my own hands shook, but this was real physical evidence. Chelsea called up again, 5 minutes, brat. Then her footsteps creaked up the stairs. Ethan, I whispered into the void, get out of there now. He zipped his bag and stepped out of the room. Chelsea stood at the top of the stairs, blocking his path with a smirk so cold it made my heartbeat hammer through the phone speaker. Going so soon? She taunted. You know, Ethan, people who cause trouble eventually get dealt with. One way or another. Keep talking, Linda whispered urgently. Give us more, say one more thing, and Chelsea did. She leaned closer to Ethan and hissed, you think your grandmother can save you. She won't even see what's coming. My blood froze, because at that exact moment, a new voice suddenly echoed through the hallway, a voice neither of us expected, and everything about the operation changed instantly. Have you ever witnessed a moment so precarious, so knife-thin, that even the air feels like it's holding its breath, waiting to see which way the blade will fall? That's exactly what it felt like when Chelsea's venomous whisper echoed through the hallway. Your grandmother won't even see what's coming. I felt every muscle in my body coil, a spark of panic igniting in my chest even though I wasn't physically there. And then the sound that changed everything, a deep, unmistakable clearing of the throat, a man's voice, a voice neither Ethan nor Chelsea expected to hear at that moment. Chelsea, Rob's puzzled tone drifted from the staircase below, and for the first time since we began this operation, she froze. Not Ethan, not me, her, because manipulation thrives only when no one else is watching. And now someone was. Through the camera, I saw her entire body stiffen. Her expression went through 3 rapid phases: shock, calculation, and then immediate adjustment into her favorite mask, the gentle, misunderstood stepmother. She straightened her shoulders, loosened her jaw, widened her eyes, and plastered on that soft, trembling lip expression she used to lure sympathy like bees to sugar. Rob, she said sweetly, I was just checking on Ethan. He gets overwhelmed, you know. The performance was flawless. She even reached for Ethan's arm as if concerned, but Ethan flinched away, and that tiny movement, so quick most people would miss it, did not go unnoticed by Linda and me watching the feed. Nor surprisingly by Rob. Why are you up here? Rob asked, climbing the last steps. His voice carried a thread of confusion, maybe even suspicion, and oh, how desperately I needed that suspicion to grow roots. I told you he was just grabbing his things. Chelsea lifted her chin, switching tactics instantly. I heard noise. I thought he was destroying the room again. She looked around the destroyed room with just the right amount of faux hurt and exasperation, as if she hadn't been the one to rip it apart in the first place. Through the feed, I saw Rob's brow crease as he took in the chaos. Something wasn't adding up for him. I felt Linda nudge my arm. Look, she whispered, he's noticing the inconsistencies. Ethan, meanwhile, was doing everything right, staying quiet, refusing to rise to her bait, letting the camera record every lie that spilled from her mouth. Chelsea moved toward him again. I'm trying, Rob, I'm really trying, but your son keeps. She stopped mid-sentence because Ethan had stepped aside, causing her hand to hang awkwardly in the air. A moment of truth accidentally exposed itself. She wasn't reaching out to comfort him. She was reaching out to control the narrative. Rob looked at Ethan. You got your clothes? Ethan nodded. His voice when he finally spoke was steady, steady enough to surprise even me. Yes, Chelsea let out a sigh, one of those dramatic, trembling sighs that suggested she had been through more emotional suffering than anyone else present. Good, she said, maybe now things can calm down. But the tension under her fake gentleness was unmistakable. She wasn't calm, she wasn't relieved. She was agitated because Ethan being near anyone but her meant she couldn't control him. Couldn't silence him, couldn't twist the story further. I'm ready to go, Ethan said quietly, stepping past her. And then it happened. As he walked down the stairs, the camera caught something astonishing, something Chelsea hadn't realized she exposed. Beneath her sleeve, when her arm lifted to hold the banister, a smear of makeup rubbed onto the wood. Not skin color, not natural shading. Foundation, heavy, smudged, cheap foundation. The exact shade covering the bruise she claimed Ethan gave her. Got it, Linda hissed triumphantly beside me. That bruise is fake, she forgot the product transfers. My heart pounded. This footage was even more powerful than the candlestick, proof that her victim act was fabricated, proof she staged the assault, proof she lied to the police, to Rob, to everyone. Ethan continued descending the stairs, but the camera, perched at chest level, caught the moment Chelsea realized what she'd done. Her eyes flicked to the banister, widening just a fraction, barely noticeable unless you watched carefully. And we were watching very carefully. Panic flashed through her expression before she smothered it beneath another mask, a softer one, a trembling, injured, almost childlike facade. "Rob," she murmured, "can you just help me for a second?" "I feel dizzy." Rob's head snapped toward her instantly, instinctively, exactly the response she counted on. She leaned dramatically against the wall, a perfectly executed shift from aggressor to victim, but Ethan kept walking. He wasn't falling into her theatrics anymore. He walked straight out the door. The moment he stepped into the sunlight, I exhaled for the first time in minutes. "Get back to the car," I whispered to the screen, even though he couldn't hear me. I watched the camera tremble as his quick steps carried him down the walkway. Then the front door swung open behind him, and Chelsea's voice followed, sharp and unmasked now that she assumed Rob wasn't within earshot. "Don't forget, Ethan, liars always get what's coming to them." Oh, if only she understood the irony. Ethan didn't answer. He just kept walking. He reached the car, slammed the door shut. His chest rose and fell in shaking breaths, but he wasn't crying. He wasn't broken. He was angry, furious, and focused. "Grandma," he whispered into the quiet of the backseat, though I wasn't there, "we got everything." All of it. Linda squeezed his hand, pride glowing in her eyes. And she was right, we had everything we needed. The footage of the destroyed room, the threat she hissed, the makeup smear proving the bruise was fake, and photos of the candlestick. But just when I felt a flicker of victory rise inside me, just when I thought we had finally gained the upper hand, Ethan's camera feed shifted. A figure stepped out onto the porch. Rob. Watching Ethan leave with a strange, conflicted expression, one I couldn't decipher. Guilt, confusion, doubt, or something else, because the very next second Rob pulled out his phone, dialing someone we least expected, and everything we thought we understood about his loyalty suddenly shattered. Have you ever seen someone standing so still that you can't tell whether they're frozen by fear, guilt, or the sudden realization that their entire world might be built on lies? That's exactly how Rob looked through the camera feed as he stood on the porch, watching Ethan walk away. The sunlight hit him at an angle that carved shadows across his face, revealing the tension in his jaw, the uncertainty in his eyes. This wasn't the Rob I raised, my son who once rushed to comfort Ethan when he scraped his knee, my son who promised me he'd always protect him. This Rob looked like a man caught between two realities. The story Chelsea fed him, and the truth unraveling right in front of his eyes. Ethan ducked into the car beside Linda and shut the door, but the feed still showed Rob standing there, staring like he was trying to decode something he couldn't fully grasp. And then he did something that made my stomach twist. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Who is he calling?" I whispered, even though Linda couldn't hear me. Ethan glanced anxiously at his own camera display as though he felt the same dread rising. It took only a moment for the answer to become clear. Chelsea appeared behind Rob, still holding her arm dramatically as if she were seconds away from collapsing. She leaned her head against his shoulder with that manipulative softness she used whenever she needed sympathy. And when he turned the phone toward her, her eyes flickered wide for a single moment. Recognition, calculation, fear. That wasn't the face of a victim. That was the face of someone terrified of exposure. "He's calling Gerald," Linda breathed beside the camera feed, identifying the name before I did. And she was right. Of course, Rob wasn't calling the police. Of course, he wasn't calling me. He was calling her lawyer, her accomplice, the same man Linda had found woven into every one of Chelsea's past schemes, inheritances, wills, suspicious deaths. Hearing Rob say, "Gerald, we need to talk now," felt like a punch directly to my heart. Not because he was choosing Chelsea, but because he was being manipulated so thoroughly he didn't even know he was walking into the enemy's arms. Chelsea's hand wrapped around his, her voice pitched in that trembling, helpless tone she used when she needed a man to protect her. "Rob, please," she whispered loud enough for the camera to catch. "He's lying again. He's twisting everything." Ethan sank lower in the car seat, guilt flickering across his face even though he had done nothing wrong. That's the cruelty of emotional abuse. Victims feel responsible for the lies told about them. Linda started the car and drove away slowly, giving us distance but keeping the camera aimed at the house until the porch shrank in the rearview mirror. Once we turned the corner, Ethan exhaled, finally letting his body melt into the seat. But before either of us could speak, Chelsea's voice crackled faintly through the audio. The camera had caught the last pieces of her conversation with Rob as they re-entered the house. She's manipulating you, Chelsea insisted. Your mother is poisoning Ethan against us. That's what narcissists do, Rob. They turn children against their own parents. Oh, the irony burned. The woman who had shattered a boy's trust in his father now claimed she was protecting him from me. Rob mumbled something we couldn't quite make out, and Chelsea's tone shifted again, less desperate, more forceful. You need to get legal help, she murmured. Gerald will tell you what to do. He always does. Always. That word sent chills through me. Rob wasn't just influenced by her, he was being actively guided by a criminal team. Linda looked at Ethan as she drove. This is exactly the proof we needed, she said firmly. Her slipping in front of Rob, the staged bruise, the threat she made, no judge ignores this kind of behavior. Ethan nodded but didn't speak. He was staring at the screen, replaying the last image of his father, a father who didn't run after him, didn't defend him, didn't question the woman dripping lies into his ear. And I could see something breaking in him, something fragile, something I desperately needed to protect. Your father isn't gone, I said gently, even though Ethan couldn't hear me in real time. He's just lost. Linda parked the car a block from my apartment, and once we were safely inside, we watched the recording again. Every second, every lie, every threatening whisper. And then 5 minutes into the playback, we heard something we had missed the first time, something faint, almost swallowed by background noise. After Rob ended the call with Gerald, he said, "Are you sure about this, Chelsea? I heard you say something earlier when you thought I wasn't listening." My entire body stiffened. Ethan's breath caught. Linda leaned closer to the speaker, and then Chelsea answered in a voice so sharp it felt like a blade being unsheathed. You heard wrong, flat, seamless, absolute, but Rob's hesitation lingered. We could hear it in the drag of his footsteps as he walked away, doubt, cracks in the conditioning, perhaps the first real crack we had seen. And predators fear cracks because light can slip through them. Ethan looked up at me. Do you think Dad heard something? My voice came out rougher than I intended. I think your father is fighting a war inside himself he doesn't even understand yet. But I also knew this simple truth. Chelsea wouldn't allow Rob's doubt to grow. She would kill it, suffocate it, twist it, just like she had done with everyone else before him. And so, for the first time, the danger level shifted. It wasn't just Ethan at risk anymore. It was Rob. He was unraveling her story without even meaning to. And predators always strike hardest when they realize their prey is waking up. And we were right to fear, because that night, Chelsea made a move none of us saw coming, a move aimed not at Ethan this time, but directly at me. Have you ever felt a heartbreak so strange, so layered, that it doesn't hit you all at once, but instead settles slowly, like dust after a building collapses? That's what washed over me that night as I sat on the couch replaying the footage again and again, the glow of the screen flickering across Ethan's exhausted face. The evidence we'd collected was damning, proof of destruction, threats, fake bruises, intimidation. But instead of relief, what I felt was a quiet, throbbing grief. Not for Chelsea, not for the battle ahead, but for my son, my Rob. Because when I watched the footage of him standing frozen in that doorway, caught between the truth and her lies, I didn't see a man choosing a monster. I saw a little boy lost in the fog of someone else's manipulation. It was the same expression he had when he was 8 years old, and a neighborhood bully convinced him that he was the problem, not the punches being thrown at him. Tonight felt painfully similar. Only now the bully was wearing perfume and wedding rings. I closed my eyes, massaging the bridge of my nose, trying to steady the ache pounding behind my ribs. Ethan sat beside me, knees pulled to his chest, the blanket wrapped around him like a fragile shield. "Grandma," he whispered, "did Dad ever love me, or was he always like this?" That question cut far deeper than anything Chelsea had done. Children shouldn't have to ask if they're loved. They shouldn't have to analyze a parent's silence like it's a crime scene. They shouldn't have bruises where hugs should be. I turned toward him, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Your father loves you," I said softly. "But love doesn't protect you if the person loving you is trapped." Ethan looked away, blinking hard. He didn't even defend me. He didn't look at me. He didn't ask if I was okay. His voice cracked, quiet, brittle. "He chose her. He didn't choose her," I said gently. "He was chosen by her." Big difference. Manipulators don't pick strong, independent minds. They pick vulnerable ones. They pick people who doubt themselves, people who want to be needed, people who crave harmony so deeply they'll swallow their own truth to keep the peace. And that was Rob, my intelligent, empathetic, wounded son. He's blind right now, I continued. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he thinks loving her means trusting her. Ethan let out a hollow laugh. "Even if it destroys me," the question twisted in my heart like a serrated blade. "Your father will face the truth," I whispered, "sooner than you think." But as much as I wanted to reassure him, I knew truth is never gentle when it finally arrives. It crashes like a storm that's been building for years. And for Rob, the storm was nearing. After Ethan went to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at the framed photos lining my shelves, Rob as a toddler standing in a pumpkin patch. Rob at his high school graduation, beaming with pride. Rob holding baby Ethan in the hospital, tears on his cheeks from joy, not sorrow. Those moments felt like scenes from a different lifetime. A lifetime before trauma, before manipulation, before a woman named Chelsea inserted herself into our lives like a smiling poison. I rubbed my arms, suddenly cold. Maybe it wasn't just the dangers Chelsea posed. Maybe it was the guilt, the realization that somewhere along the line I had let my distance grow too wide. I had retired, I had traveled, I had assumed Rob was strong enough to choose well to build a safe home. And now, sitting in my quiet living room, the weight of everything I didn't see pressed on my chest. But guilt was a luxury I no longer had time for, not when Ethan's safety hung in the balance, not when Chelsea was escalating, not when Rob was slipping deeper into her web. My phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence, a text from an unknown number: "Stay out of our family business." No signature, no emojis, no punctuation. Just a threat, crisp and chilling. I stared at the message, pulse thudding in my ears. Chelsea wasn't hiding anymore. She knew Ethan had been at the house. She knew I was involved. And now she wanted to intimidate me directly. But she had no idea who she was threatening. I screenshot the message, sent it to Linda. Within seconds, she replied, "Good, this shows she's nervous. Nervous people make mistakes." Nervous, that word settled in my bones. Because a predator who senses she's losing control often becomes more aggressive. More reckless, more dangerous. I walked to Ethan's room and peeked in. He was asleep, his breathing slow and uneven, his fists curled near his chest like he was still guarding himself even in dreams. For a long moment, I just watched him, the way his chest rose and fell, the faint bruise shadowing his cheek, the innocence Chelsea had tried so hard to crush. My heart clenched painfully because the truth was brutal. This wasn't just a fight for safety anymore. This was a fight for healing, for identity, for the boy who had been taught to fear his own home. I stepped into the hallway, leaning against the wall, letting the moonlight brush across my face. And in that moment, amid grief and anger and raw determination, the commander I used to be returned fully, not just as a whisper of instinct, but as a living force. The woman who solved cases others abandoned. The woman who saw patterns where others saw chaos. The woman who never lost a battle she chose to fight. She was back, and she wasn't leaving until this was over. "You're not alone anymore, Ethan," I whispered. "And she's not winning." But even as I said it, something unsettled stirred in my gut, an intuition honed from decades of reading lies and danger as easily as breathing. Because somewhere in another part of the city, Chelsea was planning her next move, a move meant to dismantle the very foundation of our fight. And the next morning, when Chelsea contacted Rob with a story designed to turn him completely against me, it became clear she wasn't just defending herself anymore, she was preparing for war. Have you ever watched a liar grow so confident in their own fabrications that they forget lies are like threads, pull the right one, and the whole tapestry collapses? That was exactly the thought humming in my mind the next morning when Rob showed up at my apartment unannounced, his face pale, his eyes tired, and his voice carrying a strain I hadn't heard since he was a teenager hiding bad report cards behind his back. "Mom," he said, almost pleading, "we need to talk." The last time he said those words, it was the night he told me he was marrying Chelsea. And the look in his eyes now, the same confusion, but this time tangled with dread. Ethan peeked from the hallway, instinctively cautious, holding the wall like he expected another blow, not from his father's hand, but from his father's disbelief. Rob ran a hand through his hair, pacing. She told me you're trying to turn Ethan against us because you think she's trying to replace you." The absurdity of the accusation almost made me laugh if it weren't so tragic. Chelsea had clearly fed him a new script overnight, another twisted story meant to paint me as the enemy while she played the fragile victim. But what Chelsea miscalculated, what manipulators always miscalculate, is that guilt can be exploited only for so long. Doubt, however, once it starts spreading, becomes uncontrollable. "Rob," I said quietly, "do you believe that?" His jaw tightened. I don't know. That hesitation was all I needed. Doubt was alive inside him. Cracks in Chelsea's spell had begun to form. Through the thin wall of denial, something was trying to breathe truth. "She said you and Ethan are plotting against her," he continued. "She said he staged everything to make her look abusive just because he doesn't like her rules." Ethan scoffed softly, unable to hold it in. Dad, she hit me, repeatedly. Why is that so hard for you to see? Rob's eyes glistened with conflict. Ethan, she said you get aggressive when I'm not around. She said she's scared of you. The words were so painfully ridiculous, I felt a tiny spark of my old commander self roar to life. Rob, I said, stepping closer, look at me, really look at me. He finally met my eyes. You know your son, you know his heart, you know his nature. Chelsea is telling you things that contradict everything you've known about him for 16 years. Doesn't that bother you? His silence was an answer in itself. What if, I added softly, the person you're trying to protect is the one hurting your child? His lips parted, a fracture, a crack, a breath of doubt. And that's when I realized the tactical truth. Rob wasn't the enemy, he was the battlefield, and Chelsea would burn that battlefield to the ground before she let him go. So if we wanted to pull Rob out of the fire, we needed her to reveal herself with her own words. Not my accusations, not Ethan's cries, her. That's when the plan crystallized in my mind, sharp, precise, and dangerous. A trap that only someone like me, someone who'd spent decades reading the minds of criminals, could build. Rob, I said, steady and calm, if Chelsea truly has nothing to hide, she won't object to coming here to talk. Face to face, his eyes widened. You want me to bring her here? Yes, I said. You Chelsea me, Ethan. No police, no accusations, just a conversation. Rob hesitated. I could see the wheels turning. Chelsea never liked situations she couldn't control. If she refused, it would expose her fear. If she agreed, she'd have no idea she'd be walking into a carefully orchestrated trap, a trap with cameras. A trap with witnesses, a trap where every slip of her tongue would be recorded. I don't know if she'll come, he said weakly. Oh, she'll come, I murmured. People like Chelsea never turned down a chance to perform. And then I whispered the real bait. Tell her I'm ready to discuss my house and my will. Rob froze. It was subtle but unmistakable, the exact lure Chelsea could never resist. Money, control, inheritance, everything she had been building toward. Rob left shortly after, promising to talk to her. Ethan stood beside me at the window as he walked away. Grandma, he whispered, are you sure this is safe? No, I admitted honestly. But it's necessary. The moment the door closed behind him, Linda arrived, almost on cue, carrying 2 duffel bags and the kind of fierce determination only women who have seen too much injustice carry. Tell me you didn't just invite that woman here, she said. I did, I replied, and we're preparing for her like she's a hurricane. Linda didn't argue, she knew it was time. She opened the duffel bags and pulled out the equipment, tiny cameras disguised as decor, audio recorders hidden in vent grills, pen-shaped microphones woven into picture frames. If she confesses, Linda said, clipping a microphone beneath my kitchen shelf, we'll capture every second. She will, I replied. Her ego won't let her stay quiet. People like her can't resist bragging when they think they've already won. Ethan hovered near the doorway, anxiety radiating off him. She's dangerous, he whispered. She'll know something's wrong. Not if we play our roles perfectly, I said. Tonight I'm not your grandmother. Tonight I'm the woman she thinks she's already defeated. I rehearsed the lines in my mind, the fragility, the apology, the wobble in my voice she expected, the hint of surrender, the illusion of defeat. Because predators are boldest when they believe the prey is weak, and I planned to let her believe exactly that. Hours later, Rob texted, she's coming tomorrow at 3 p.m. She wants to bring her lawyer too. Perfect. Gerald walking into the trap with her would be the equivalent of catching 2 snakes in the same net. Linda looked at me, tension tightening her jaw. You know this could get ugly, she warned. It always does, I answered. But the truth will choke her long before she chokes us. Ethan squeezed my hand. Grandma, what if she tries something? Then she'll learn the one lesson she never expected, I whispered. Prey grows teeth when you push them too far. The room settled into silence, each of us knowing tomorrow wouldn't just expose Chelsea, it would decide the future of our family. My heart thudded with a mixture of resolve and sorrow, because I knew one truth Chelsea didn't. I wasn't fighting her to win. I was fighting her because losing was not an option. And when 3 p.m. finally arrived, and Chelsea strutted into my home with her lawyer at her side, she had no idea she was walking straight into the jaws of the trap she helped design. Have you ever prepared for something so important, so high stakes, that every movement feels like arranging pieces on a battlefield, knowing that once the first shot is fired, nothing will ever return to the way it was? That's exactly how the hours before 3 p.m. felt, as Linda and I turned my quiet little apartment into a silent trap woven with truth, wires, and strategy. The sunlight through the curtains looked strangely soft, as if unaware of the war brewing inside these walls. Ethan kept pacing, his nervous energy brushing against everything he passed, pausing only to watch us set up another hidden device. The living room table became our command center: lists, camera feeds, microphones, placement sketches. Nothing about this felt like a grandmother preparing for a visit. It felt like the final hours before an undercover operation I used to run in my early career. Linda placed a tiny camera inside a hollowed-out candle on my shelf. Another was fitted into a plant pot. Two microphones were threaded through the vents. One was hidden beneath a doily on the table, another disguised as a decorative pen in my pocket. "We need full room coverage," she whispered, adjusting the angle. "Chelsea and Gerald are too smart for obvious traps." She wasn't wrong. Chelsea had evaded suspicion for years, slipping through investigations and manipulating families like a virtuoso conducting a symphony of destruction. But this time she was stepping into a home designed by someone who understood predators better than they understood themselves. "Grandma, are you sure this is safe?" Ethan asked for the fourth time, watching us from the couch. He looked older today, not physically, emotionally. Trauma ages children in ways no birthday ever could. "It isn't safe," I told him calmly, tucking a camera into the corner of a picture frame, "but it's necessary." "Safety comes after truth." He swallowed, nodding. "She's going to be angry." Oh, he had no idea. Chelsea wasn't just going to be angry, she was going to be exposed, unmasked. And the thing about people like her is that they aren't afraid of being confronted, they're afraid of losing control. "Ethan," I said softly, "today you don't speak unless spoken to. You don't react, you just observe." The moment she thinks you're not afraid of her anymore, she'll shift tactics, and we want her exactly where she feels the most powerful, right in the center of her performance. Linda chimed in, "Manipulators can't resist proving they're smarter. They brag without meaning to. It's ego, their greatest weakness." I nodded. "Chelsea will reveal herself today, she just doesn't know it yet." With an hour left, we rehearsed my role: soft, frail, apologetic. I would welcome Chelsea with trembling hands and a cracked voice, the very image of a grandmother who had been broken down emotionally, beaten by guilt, ready to surrender. Because nothing makes a predator careless faster than believing their prey is defeated. "You have to look like you're giving up," Linda said, watching me rehearse. "She needs to believe you're ready to sign over the house." My stomach twisted, not out of fear, but because of the psychological violence behind it. Pretending to hand over my home, my sanctuary, the place where Rob took his first steps, where Ethan learned to read, was the hardest part. But the house wasn't what mattered. Saving my family mattered. Rebuilding what Chelsea had shattered mattered. At 2:30 p.m., Ethan quietly disappeared into his room. I found him staring at the floor, twisting his fingers. "Hey," I whispered, crouching beside him. "You scared?" He shook his head, then nodded, then shrugged helplessly. I don't want to see her, not again." My chest tightened. "You won't be alone this time," I said, "and you won't ever be again." He glanced up at me. "Promise, promise." I hugged him, feeling his heartbeat drum against my shoulder. This wasn't a child preparing for a conversation. This was a survivor preparing to face the monster who had stolen his safety. At 2:50 p.m., Linda dimmed the living room lights and turned on the recorder. The room instantly felt smaller, heavier, like the walls themselves were tense. "Positions," Linda whispered. She moved to the back hallway where she could monitor audio without being seen. Ethan took his seat at the edge of the couch, small and silent. I sat in my recliner, the one piece of furniture that made me look older, weaker. I folded a blanket over my lap, dabbed a bit of lotion under my eyes to make them look redder, and placed my shaking hands on top of a stack of legal papers Linda had mocked up. The scene was perfect. A grandmother surrendering to pressure, a defeated woman about to sign away everything, a trap baited with vulnerability. At exactly 3 p.m., exactly as planned, the doorbell rang, 3 slow, deliberate chimes. A sound that made Ethan flinch and made my heart settle into fierce, icy readiness. "Showtime," Linda murmured through the earpiece. I took a deep breath, letting my shoulders slump, preparing my meek voice. Ethan's eyes widened with dread. And then I opened the door. Chelsea stood there in a beige coat, her hair flowing like she'd walked out of a magazine. Her smile was bright, gentle saccharine poison, and next to her stood Gerald, tall, smug, carrying a slim briefcase full of falsified confidence. Rob hovered behind them, emotional exhaustion etched across his face like a bruise. "Eleanor," Chelsea chimed, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I'm so glad you're ready to talk." She kissed the air beside my cheek like we were old friends. Her arrogance was palpable. She believed she had already won. She believed today was the day she claimed my home, my son, my grandson's silence. A predator entering her perceived victory. a spider stepping into her web. Her heels clicked across my floor like punctuation marks of her anticipated triumph. She had no idea every step she took, every breath she exhaled was being captured, recorded, documented. I ushered them in with a trembling voice, letting my shoulders sag even more. I just want peace, I whispered. Chelsea lit up. Oh, the performance she would give today, and how beautifully it would destroy her. But she didn't know that the moment she sat down on my couch, the first thread of her lies would unravel, and she would be the one to pull it herself. Have you ever seen someone walk into a room utterly convinced they're the smartest person there, only to realize too late that they've stepped onto a stage where every spotlight is pointed at their lies? That's exactly what washed over the room the moment Chelsea settled onto my couch, smoothing her expensive coat as if she were preparing for a magazine interview rather than an intervention. Gerald stood beside her like a shadow with a law degree, already unbuckling his briefcase as though the victory papers were ready to be signed. Rob lingered near the doorway, shoulders tense, eyes flicking between all of us as if unsure whether he'd entered a family meeting or the opening act of a silent war. Ethan sat rigid on the far end of the couch, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. I kept my posture small, meek, even though every part of me buzzed with the cold, strategic focus of a seasoned investigator. Thank you for coming, I said, letting my voice tremble just enough to feed Chelsea's ego. She smiled sweetly, crossing her legs like a queen settling onto her throne. Of course, she replied, syrup dripping from every word. Families should resolve conflicts calmly. I'm glad you're finally ready to make peace. Her tone was soft, her eyes razor sharp. Manipulators can coat their daggers in honey. Gerald cleared his throat and placed a stack of documents on the table, tapping them with the tip of his pen. Before we begin, Mrs. Stone, I want to ensure we're all on the same page. My client has expressed concern regarding your influence over Ethan. Ethan stiffened. I gently reached for a tissue, pretending to dab my eyes. I just want what's best for my family, I whispered. If that means stepping back, I will. Chelsea's smile widened too wide, like someone who'd rehearsed this moment in the mirror. See, Rob, she cooed. She understands. Rob's brow creased, but he remained quiet. That was fine. His silence meant he was listening, really listening, for the first time in months. One thing, I added softly, before we sign anything. Gerald perked up, ready for the kill. Chelsea leaned forward, eager. Yes, I want us to clear the air, I said. Heart to heart, no papers, no lawyers, just truth. Chelsea blinked, thrown off balance for just a breath. Manipulators rely on scripts, but a raw emotional appeal forces improvisation, and improvisation exposes cracks. Of course, she said, regaining composure. Ask whatever you need. I nodded slowly, wringing my hands for effect. Ethan said you struck him. A flicker, a twitch. Something sharp flashed across her face before she smothered it under a mask of wounded innocence. Oh, Alina, you know teenagers exaggerate. He attacked me. I defended myself. Ethan's jaw clenched. I placed a calming hand on his knee. I just want to understand, I murmured. If my grandson hurt you, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you ask for help? She laughed softly. Laughed. Oh, sweet Alina, I didn't want to worry you. I was trying to protect you. That was the first thread unraveling. Protect me from my own grandson? I tilted my head. But the bruise on your arm? Yes, she cut in quickly, lifting her sleeve dramatically. See what he did to me. Under the room's lighting, the makeup smear was almost invisible, but the cameras caught it perfectly. Gerald leaned in as though inspecting evidence, but even he couldn't see the faint, powdery residue clinging to her skin. You poor thing, I whispered. You must have been terrified. Her eyes softened, her posture relaxing. She thought she had me. I was, she breathed. Rob wasn't home. I was alone. Ethan, he snapped. Ethan's breath hitched in outrage. Rob's eyes darted toward his son, doubt blooming again. Time to pull the next thread. And the broken cameras? I asked. Why didn't they capture anything? For the first time, her mask slipped, not a lot, but enough. A twitch, a hesitation. They were malfunctioning, she said too quickly. Coincidentally, during the argument, I murmured. Unlucky timing. Exactly, she replied. Just unlucky timing. Gerald chimed in smoothly. Security systems malfunction all the time, Mrs. Stone. It's not unusual, but he overplayed it. Too defensive too soon. I see, I said softly, pretending to wilt. Then I reached for the stack of fake papers Linda had prepared. Before I do anything with my will, I whispered, I just need reassurance. Chelsea inhaled sharply, her pupils dilated. She leaned forward, sensing victory, because in her mind, this entire meeting was about her gaining access to my estate. Reassurance of what? She asked, voice soft as velvet. I looked down at my lap. That my death wouldn't complicate anything for you. Silence, thick, heavy, electric. Chelsea sat very still, too still. Ethan held his breath. Rob's eyes widened, Gerald's pen froze mid-click, and then slowly Chelsea smiled, the most chilling smile she had revealed yet. Eleanor, she said, your passing wouldn't change anything. We would take care of everything. You don't need to worry. There it was, the slip, the confession wrapped in fake compassion, the predator speaking through polished teeth. I felt Linda tense in the hallway. Gerald quickly placed a hand on Chelsea's arm, recognizing too late that she'd spoken too freely. What my client means, he said hastily, is, I know what she means. I cut in softly, strength rising beneath the tremble. I know exactly what she means. Chelsea's smile faltered. For the first time since she walked through my door, she looked uncertain. Eleanor, she said cautiously, what are you implying? I'm implying, I said gently, that we all remove our masks now. Her eyes narrowed, Gerald stiffened. Rob finally stepped forward. Mom, he asked, voice trembling, what's going on? I turned to him, voice steady now, not frail, not afraid, but the voice of the woman I once was. Rob, I said, before we continue, there's something you need to see. Because when Linda stepped out from the hallway holding the tablet with all the recorded footage and pressed play, Chelsea's entire world began to collapse in real time. Have you ever watched a confident person begin to unravel like a seam pulled the wrong way, fast at first, then with a slow, inevitable collapse, because they said one thing they couldn't take back? That's what filled the air the moment Linda pressed play on the tablet and the room filled with the day's recorded footage. Ethan finding the candlestick, Chelsea's whispered threats on the stairs, the foundation smudge on the banister, the phone call to Gerald, her boasts when she thought no one could hear. The images started as fragments, pieces of evidence we had painstakingly gathered. And then, like a dam breaking, they poured out into a single unstoppable river that washed away every carefully constructed lie Chelsea had stacked around herself. At first, she tried to smile through it, to redirect with the practiced charm that had worked on older men and lonely hearts before, but the camera showed things she couldn't undo, the way she dragged the candlestick under a pile of notebooks. The slow, deliberate self-infliction of bruises, the offhand comments to Gerald about timing and wrapping things up. The footage was surgical, precise, uncompromising, and it spoke with a clarity that no rehearsal could drown out. Gerald's face darkened as he watched. His practiced calm betrayed a flicker of panic. Rob's hands trembled. Ethan went pale, then flushed with a rage that had been sleeping too long. And Chelsea, oh, she changed in an instant from preen predator to exposed animal, her eyes darting, lips biting, the posture that had been all armor now suddenly small and ragged. She tried to laugh it off, to call it edited montage, to point out supposed inconsistencies, but every careless phrase she had uttered in private replayed in the room and cemented itself into the evidence on the screen. When the clip of her saying, when the old lady dies, Rob will inherit her house. We'll sell it, the kid, we'll send him away, filled the speakers, you could hear a pin drop. Even Gerald, who had seen many defenses, paled. That's taken out of context, he blurted, an argument so weak even he knew it wasn't true, but the sound of his own words in the silence made them ring hollow. Rob's posture went from confused to betrayed in a breath. You could see the memory flicker on his face, late nights when Chelsea whispered in his ear, the subtle rewrites of his life she'd performed, the little slights that had become a long list. The slow dawning on his face was like watching frost melt. A beautiful, terrible clarity. Is this, are you sure? He croaked, and the tablet played another clip, Chelsea on the phone with Gerald saying, we need to speed things up. The old lady won't know what hit her. That was the moment his world shifted so fast he staggered. Grief armor fell away into something rawer, pure, betrayed pain, and then the most devastating thing happened. Chelsea did what predators always do when they finally understand the ground is burning beneath them. She tried to fight back by taking control of the narrative one last time, by appealing to the man who still loved her or wanted to. Rob, they're manufacturing this against me, she hissed, but the camera already betrayed her. Her sleeve showed traces of makeup on the banister, the candlestick's metal reflected in the lens, and her voice trembled with the last gasps of an actress who knew the curtain had finally been pulled. Rob staggered away from her like a man struck. His eyes shifted from her to the screen to his own hands, as if searching in them for the man he used to be. How could you? He asked, not entirely sure whether he meant her or himself. Evidence doesn't beg, it announces. And that announcement left Gerald with fewer options than he had hoped. He began to stammer legalese about privacy, about edited clips, about entrapment, words meant to cloud and confuse, but they fell flat because the footage was raw, continuous, unedited camera to phone to tablet. A chain of custody every investigator dreams of. I felt a bitter, quiet triumph rise inside me, not for the fall of a woman, but for the vindication of a child who had begged to be believed, and for the sliver of truth finally found by those who refused to look away. Chelsea's defenses crumbled fastest not when we played the candlestick video, but when we replayed the clip of her on the stairs whispering to Gerald, "Get the will in order, the accounts moved." It'll be clean, the brutality of that private call, cold, practical, smiling over money as family collapsed, should have been nauseating. Instead, the room hummed with a dangerous clarity. The plan had been laid bare. Rob, who had once been so patient and kind, became a man transformed. He confronted Chelsea the way a man finally cutting through fog does, blunt, urgent, and as vulnerable as anyone forced to choose between two versions of his life can be. "You told me she was the problem," he said to her, voice breaking. "You told me she was difficult so I would leave her alone. You told me she was sick so I'd be gentle. How could you turn our son into a villain?" The questions were sharp as knives. For everyone he asked, there was footage from our cameras to answer. At one point, Chelsea sputtered, trying to salvage an excuse, claiming desperation, claiming fear, claiming manipulation from Gerald, but even Gerald's face gave him away. The greed that had always glinted behind his lawyerly posture now looked like complicity rather than counsel. He shifted restlessly, the briefcase between his knees suddenly heavy with more than papers, heavy with the weight of evidence that would convict. As Chelsea's web collapsed, her movements grew erratic, snapping at Rob, then turning to me with theatrical tears, then belligerent, then pleading. But pleading became less believable each time she tried it. The cameras had trapped authenticity inside them. You couldn't fake the tiny gestures of shame and calculation the device had recorded, and every fake tear and rehearsed tremor read loud and clear for anyone willing to watch. Finally, with a jagged voice that split between bravado and raw desperation, Chelsea lunged for a different defense. "Blame. You pushed me," she accused, eyes wild now. "You made me do things." Her accusation landed empty because there was nothing to throw back at it, only footage of her planting the candlestick, cleaning the paint off her arm, calling Gerald, instructing him on wills, on power transfers, on the timing. Her final tactic, blame, fell like a leaf in a hurricane. Gerald did what crooked lawyers often do at the end of a failing play. He tried to cut a deal, muttering legal threats, suggesting mediation, talking about reputations, about settlements, about what the press might say. But a man who had orchestrated disappearances and suspicious deaths doesn't get to negotiate his way out of recorded confessions. The room closed around Chelsea like a net. Rob's face crumpled, and in that collapse I saw the child I'd once held, the little boy who used to run into my arms. He looked at Ethan as though apologizing for years of absence, and on the couch Ethan's expression was a complex thing, relief washing into sorrow, fury into a strange, reluctant tenderness. "What do we do?" Rob whispered, a man who had finally been gifted the truth but not the time to heal. I reached for Ethan's hand, feeling his palms small and trembling in mine. Outside, sirens could have been coming. Inside, the consequences had already begun. Chelsea's slip had torn the final paper curtain from a man's eyes, and when the police were called, officially this time, there was no theatrics left to hide behind. And when the squad arrived to take Chelsea and Gerald away, Rob fell to his knees in the living room, not in triumph, but in a grief so complete it changed the shape of our family forever. Yet even as the door closed behind them, I knew this ending was only the beginning of what we had to fix. Have you ever noticed that after a storm, even when the clouds finally break and sunlight slips through, the world feels strangely heavier, like the air is still remembering the thunder that just passed? That's exactly how the living room felt after Chelsea and Gerald were escorted out by police, handcuffed and silent, except for the rustle of their clothes and the distant murmur of officers reading rights neither of them thought they'd ever hear. The door clicked shut, sealing them on the other side of the life they'd tried so hard to steal, and what remained inside wasn't relief, not yet, but a trembling quiet filled with broken hearts, cracked illusions, and the faint, tentative shape of healing that hadn't quite learned to stand. Rob collapsed onto the floor, not with drama, but with the weight of a man who finally realizes every wrong turn he didn't notice, every warning he ignored, every moment his own child felt alone while he was being fed lies. He covered his face with both hands, shoulders shaking, not loudly, not theatrically, but with that painful, stifled grief of someone mourning not just what happened, but who they became because of it. I had seen hardened detectives break down like this only once or twice in my career, and those moments had always carved something deep into my memory. This one cut even deeper because it was my son. Ethan stood frozen, one hand gripping the back of the couch, uncertain whether he was allowed to move toward the man who had doubted him, dismissed him, and unintentionally abandoned him. His breathing was shallow, almost frightened, as though walking toward Rob might reopen a wound he wasn't sure could survive another cut. "Dad," he whispered, the word fragile as spun glass. Rob looked up slowly, his eyes red, face wet, and he stared at Ethan as though truly seeing him for the first time in years. Not through Chelsea's filters, not through insecurity, not through manipulation. "Ethan's," he choked out, reaching toward him but stopping halfway, afraid he no longer had the right. And the moment that followed wasn't cinematic or dramatic, it was quiet and raw. Ethan took one step, then another. And when Rob broke completely, pulling his son into his arms, the sound that escaped him wasn't a cry, it was a shudder, a remorseful exhale that carried every apology he could never form into words. Ethan stiffened at first, trauma makes trust a slow visitor, but then his shoulders loosened and he let himself be held. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, it was acknowledgement, recognition. The first stone laid in rebuilding a bridge that had nearly collapsed under the weight of lies. I watched them with a heart that ached and softened at the same time, because healing is never clean. It's jagged, uneven, and full of moments where you don't know whether to cry or be grateful. I lowered myself onto the couch, exhaustion settling in, the adrenaline that had fueled me for days finally draining from my veins. Linda slipped into the room quietly, giving space but also grounding us with her presence. "The officers said Chelsea and Gerald won't be released tonight," she murmured. "They have enough to charge both. They'll be questioning them separately." A small, bitter part of me wanted to smile. Predators like Chelsea crumble fastest when their accomplices disappear. She would unravel in interrogation just as she had in my living room. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, sinking beside me. Such a simple question for such a massive, tangled future. "Now," Linda said gently, "we let the system do what it's supposed to do, and we focus on us." Rob wiped his face, shame etched in every line. "Mom, I failed him. You were manipulated," I said softly. And manipulation that deep doesn't look like manipulation from the inside. It looks like love. It looks like loyalty. "You weren't failing, you were being targeted." He shook his head, tears falling again. "But I hurt him. I let her hurt him." Ethan looked at the floor, jaw tight. "You believed her over me," he murmured. A simple statement, but it cracked something invisible between them. Rob nodded slowly, painfully. "I did, and I am so, so sorry." Silence stretched, not awkward, but heavy with truth. Forgiveness isn't instant. But acknowledgement is everything. After a long moment, Ethan's voice softened. "Can we just start over?" Rob nodded fiercely, as though handed one more chance to save what he thought he'd lost forever. "Anything you want," he whispered. "Anything." Night settled slowly after that, the house dimming into a soft blue-gray quiet. Linda left with a promise to update me as soon as the charges processed. Rob insisted on staying with us, sleeping on the couch, refusing to leave Ethan's side. I watched him, this grown man who had once been my little boy, now curled in a blanket like someone afraid to wake up and find that the truth had been a dream. And Ethan, who had been bruised and scared and silent for far too long, finally slept without flinching at shadows. I sat by the window as the city lights flickered, letting the events of the past week settle in my bones. We had won the first battle, but the war was healing, rebuilding trust, undoing trauma, relearning love. And yet, for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt hope stirring, cautious but real. Chelsea's chapter in our lives wasn't just ending, it was being locked away, filed under dangerous predators, sealed by the justice system. But Ethan's life, Rob's life, mine, we were stepping into something new, something honest. Something that had nearly been taken from us forever. As dawn crept across the sky, painting the world gold, I looked at my sleeping son and grandson and whispered to myself, not as a commander, not as a fighter, but as a grandmother who refused to surrender her family. "We're still here, and we're not done." Because sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a stronger family rising from the ashes.